It's Tuesday, it's 10:15 and we're live in Westminster.
I'd say without any hesitation to any colleague in Parliament, what we have before us today is not only an improvement, it is better than the system that we have at present.
Ministers are urging Labour MPs to vote for their welfare plans tonight, but many of them are still refusing to fall into line.
This is not the right thing to do. It's not a Labour thing to do. We're there to protect the poor, to ensure that disabled people have a future.
The Conservatives say spending on welfare is unsustainable, but they'll also be voting against the government's cuts.
If you're too scared to tackle your backbenchers, then you're not going to get anything done.
Much of the UK and Europe is facing extreme heat and there are major wildfires in Turkey. Will any of this change people's minds about net zero? Joining me today, Labour MP Rosie Wrighting, Conservative MP Joe Robertson, Fatima Ibrahim from Green New Deal Rising, which campaigns on climate change, and Sebastian Payne from The Times. This is Politics Live. Now, as we were hearing there, MPs will vote later this evening on the government's plans for welfare reform. But despite a large number of concessions from ministers, there are dozens of Labour MPs who still are not very happy about it and threatening to vote against the plans. Seb, how much trouble is the government in on this, do you think?
The danger for Keir Starmer is that he's going to end up in the worst of all worlds, which is all pain and no gain with these welfare cuts, because this package was put forward both for an economic reason to save government spending, but also for a moral reason that we heard a lot from the Labour Party about being the party of work, for example. But where they've ended up now by sort of metering down some of the proposed changes means the government's got to find £3 billion down the back of the sofa now to fill in the public finances. And yet, as we've heard, many Labour MPs are still not happy with what's being put forward. So I imagine the government's going to win the vote tonight because they've done enough to shave off some of the rebels and get that down from where it was last week when it was on course to lose it. But for Keir Starmer, it's not exactly an authoritative moment for the Prime Minister, and relations with his MPs have been badly damaged by the last week, and it was this time last week that the complaints were being described as noises off with Labour MPs, whereas now it's very much we're a listening government, we're in listening mode. So the drama may have slightly passed, but I think this kind of underlying tension of the relationship between Downing Street and Labour MPs and what to do about that overall welfare bill and how you can maybe get the bill down in a fair, sustainable way that protects the poorest, that is a big debate that's going to roll on. Meanwhile, not long before we'll be getting into budget season, we'll have to think about how to fill that hole in the public finances being opened up not only by this, but also by the changes on winter fuel allowance and potentially on two-child benefit as well.
Rosie, what do you make of what's happened here? I mean, there's been a lot of concessions given, but dozens of Labour MPs still really unhappy about it.
From the beginning, I have stated that these reforms are principles that I believe in. I think that this is right, that the government looked at welfare so early on in the Parliament. The bill that we inherited from the Conservatives was completely unsustainable. It wasn't protecting the most vulnerable, but it wasn't enabling people to get back into work. This package puts forward £1 billion, which helps people get back into work with things like work coaches. It means that people can try work without fear of losing their benefits, and that is the change in welfare that I will be voting for.
But dozens of your colleagues are still really unhappy about it.
Yes, and they have had over the last few weeks and days the space to raise those concerns, and ministers and the Prime Minister has listened, and those concessions have been put forward. And I think it's right that we have the space in Parliament to have those conversations and the MPs are heard.
Joe, changing the welfare system is always difficult for governments, and your previous government found the same thing. So Keir Starmer's, he's listening to what his MPs are saying?
Well, he's being led by 120 backbench MPs, which is never good for any Prime Minister. I support welfare reform, genuine welfare reform. That's not what this bill is about. This bill is a cash grab because the Chancellor has run out of money and she needs a quick fix. welfare is one of those things. There's never a system that's going to last for an entire generation without needing reform along the way. We last had big reform at the beginning of the last Conservative government with David Cameron and Ian Duncan Smith. COVID encourage more people to be dependent on the state. Clearly, we need root and branch welfare reform. This Labour government knew, the Labour Party knew it was coming into government, and it basically has no plan for welfare reform. And that's why I'm voting against this bill today, because some people in genuine need will lose out.
No plan?
No, I don't think that's true at all. I think the Tories put this in the too difficult to deal with box, and you kick the can down the road. And once again, it's been up to this Labour government to pick up the mess. And I also think to say that the increase in PIP applicants and health conditions is purely due to COVID is just not true. We hear multiple reasons that weren't addressed by your government as to why there's been an increase in long-term health conditions, and that's what the Timms review will properly look at. But the Tories they put this in a too difficult box.
Fatima?
I mean, it's interesting that you talk about values, Rosie. So what I'm hearing is your values are that we should be balancing the books on the backs of disabled people. And you're making this sort of assumption that we pit work against PIP. PIP is not a benefit. It's a recognition that we have a society that isn't built in a way that is accessible to disabled people, right? And PIP supports people into work. And what you're doing with these concessions is creating a two-tier system, that someone who's disabled today and someone who becomes disabled after this legislation is passed is not able to access the same support. I mean, that's preposterous to me that we would have a welfare system like that. And this is a quick fix. This is something that hasn't had a deep consultation with Labour MPs, with disabled people, to ensure that we have a welfare system that actually does deal with the root causes. And I guess my question to you is, you've insinuated it, but do you think people are lying when they're applying for PIP? Do you think people are making up the support that they need to access PIP? Because that is the assumption that's underlying these reforms.
Rosie, come back quickly. We'll come back to this in a minute, but just answer that point.
My values are in the fact that I believe that people should be incentivised into work. Work can be a massive benefit to people. 1 in 8 young people not earning or learning is just not okay. I know for me, my first job gave me confidence, gave me those skills, and I want that. I want that for the young people in my constituency and young people across the country as well. I think there are Labour values deep-rooted in these reforms, because we are protecting the most vulnerable, meaning that they don't have to go through things like reassessments, and those who can work are being properly supported into work.
But your rhetoric is both dangerous and deeply offensive. You're talking about this as if this is an allowance that we give to a child. I'll take your pocket money away and maybe it'll incentivize you to go to work. This is not what that is. These are people who desperately need this. 150,000 people are going to be plunged into poverty after these concessions. These are not concessions, as long as they're plunging people into poverty who desperately need this support to be able to function, to be able to live and to work.
But what we also do know is that people are less likely to be in poverty if they do have proper access to work. And within what I'm voting for today is a £1 billion package to support people into work, something that hasn't been done previously. And that is about giving people dignity as well and allowing them to have the opportunity to work without fear of losing their benefits.
Can I just say on poverty, the government's own assessment of this will push people into poverty. If this goes through tonight, it will push thousands of children into poverty. So there's no principle there that's saving people from poverty.
Well, the figures of 150,000, first of all, don't take into consideration what we are doing to support people into work. And in terms of child poverty, we have done already, and I know there's more to do. I see children in my own constituency in poverty. I grew up in a single parent family. I didn't grow up with a lot of money. I know how that feels. But things like free breakfast clubs, a cap on uniform, increasing the minimum wage, these also help get children out of poverty, and that is what this government has done.
I just want to bring in Henry Zeffman, who's our chief political correspondent, who has been gauging reaction. He's just outside Westminster speaking to people. And Henry, how much trouble is the government in here, given it has made concessions? There's still a lot of its own MPs who are really not persuaded by this.
I think the fact, Vicky, that the government isn't even sure now, having made those concessions, and in the context of having a 165-seat majority, remember, the fact that the government isn't even sure this morning that it will win this vote is staggering. all we really have to go off is what Rachel Maskell, leading Labour rebel, has published on the order paper, a reasoned amendment. Now, that doesn't really do it justice. What it means is it would stop the bill in its tracks. That's been signed by 39 Labour MPs. That's a large number. It's not enough or close to defeat the government. But actually, just having had conversations in Parliament behind me over the last hour or so, things are a bit more jittery for the government and its supporters than those numbers would suggest. So I think worth watching that closely over the course of the day.
I mean, is there any suggestion, Henry? It is incredible that after those concessions and after we've talked about this for several days, it is incredible that that vote might still be in some doubt. You know, I get what you're saying, that the government has a massive majority. Do you think that ministers are aware of this? Do you think they're going to give any more concessions at this late stage?
I don't think they're going to give any more concessions, but I mean, in fact, I was just speaking to someone who's stayed loyal throughout this whole thing, who's furious at the first batch of concessions and said if they give a second batch, then this government might as well just fold on every other issue at the same time. I mean, this is the thing. Keir Starmer's being tugged in all sorts of different directions at the moment. You know, it is worth saying, we have Labour people, be they rebels, be they ministers, be they backbenchers who support the government, across the airwaves at the moment saying, well, everyone in the Labour Party supports welfare reform. If you speak to people in there, they all mean different things by welfare reform. It's just not true to say. It's a bit like saying, you know, everyone in the world supports world peace. Well, yeah, sure, they do. But, you know, we don't seem to have a lot of it, do we?
Henry, on that note, thank you very much indeed. I'm sure we'll be talking to you tomorrow after that vote has happened. Well, Liz Kendall, the Work and Pensions Secretary, was in the Commons yesterday making the case for the government. There were lots of angry Labour MPs questioning her, but this is what she had to say.
There have also been real concerns about our initial proposals. We have listened carefully and we are making positive changes as a result. Welfare reform is never easy, but it is essential because there is no route to equality or social justice based on greater benefit spending alone. The path to a fairer society where everyone can thrive, where people who can work get the support they need, and where we protect those who cannot work, that is the path we seek to build with our reforms.
Well, one of those Labour MPs who is still unpersuaded is Richard Bergen. He joins us from our Westminster studio. Why are you still not backing these plans, Richard?
Well, fundamentally, when we hear about concessions, what we're talking about is taking off some of the cuts that the government had originally planned. And what many Labour MPs are doing is not comparing the bill that the government intended with the bill that it's now promising. What lots of my Labour colleagues are doing is comparing the situation for disabled people in their constituencies now and the situation for disabled people in their constituencies after this bill is put into practice, if it passes. And this bill makes things worse for disabled people.
And we've been hearing from Henry Zeffman then saying lots of Labour MPs do say that welfare reform is required. Do you think that welfare reform is required? And what do you mean by that, if you do?
Well, he's right that when people say welfare reform, they mean different things. When I say welfare reform, I mean co-designing a benefit system, a welfare system, in partnership with disabled people and others to make it sure it actually works for people. Whereas some colleagues, when they say welfare reform, what they really mean is cutting billions of pounds from disability benefit. And that's what this bill will do.
So you don't think that the welfare bill in total needs to be reduced?
I don't think we should bring a bill that has its driving motivation trying to balance the books on the backs of disabled people. For example, you could reduce the welfare bill in another way. Just take a look at the way that tens of billions of pounds in the coming years are being given through the benefit system to private landlords. If we have a Labour government that succeeds in really building sufficient council houses, then that bill can really be reduced. That would seem fair. I don't see why so many private landlords, big private landlords, should be doing so well out the benefit system.
But the welfare bill is due to keep rising, and in terms of those who are claiming personal independence payments, which is a main focus of this bill and the changes, there are 1,000 people a day going on to that benefit. 1 in 6 people on that benefit are in work. Are you concerned that there aren't more who are in work?
Well, we want to ensure that everyone has the opportunity to go to work, but let's be clear, because there's a lot of talk about this that isn't quite accurate. PIP isn't an out-of-work benefit. Some front benches are speaking about it as if it is. And the other thing that this bill will do...
But a lot of those who are on it aren't in work, and the government says that part of this is about getting better work coaching and trying to get them back into employment.
Can I cut to the chase? Government ministers are saying a lot of things. What it's really about is saving money. They want to adhere to a fiscal rule, cut billions of pounds, and they decided that the way they want to do it, or the easiest way to do it, is to take money off people who need assistance to cut up their food, wash themselves, go to the toilet and get dressed. I don't think that's a Labour way to do it. I think a far more Labour way to try and balance the books, if that's what we need to do, is to introduce a wealth tax. For example, a wealth tax of 2% on assets over £10 million would raise £24 billion, far, far, far in excess of what this bill is planning to save for the Treasury. So
it doesn't seem very likely that Rachel Reeves, the Chancellor, is going to do that. How many of your colleagues, would you say, agree with you about opposing this bill?
A large number, and I think, unfortunately...
Dozens?
Well, more than that. I think that after the statement in Parliament yesterday, I think some MPs who were wavering are now much more likely to vote against, because ultimately none of us got into Labour politics in order to make disabled people poorer. And what's going to happen now, and I say this to all my colleagues, is that people end up being defined by this vote. This vote, if people sit on their hands and abstain or don't vote against these cuts, because that's what it's a bill for cuts tonight, that will hang like an albatross around their necks, and they'll be dealing with that in their constituency surgeries Friday after Friday after Friday and Saturday after Saturday after Saturday, when disabled people come to see their local Labour MP and say, I'm in a real problem, I'm in a real financial mess, can you help me? But they'll know that the reason they're in the financial mess is because their Labour MP voted through these cuts. The reality is this as well. Whatever people say in the chamber, whatever people say on TV, I can guarantee you this: if this were a free vote, you would find it hard to find many Labour MPs who would vote for it. If this wasn't a whipped vote, this would 100% be voted down tonight. And so lots of people are going to end up, or some people are going to end up, biting the tongue, and voting for this when they don't really want to, and the conscience is telling them not to, because they think it's the Labour thing to do. But it's not the Labour thing to do. And as we've seen with the winter fuel payment cuts, Labour leaders and Labour governments can change their position later on, and that can leave MPs who don't vote with their consciences feeling pretty stranded when they have to face the constituents, not only at their surgeries, but at the next general election.
Are you expecting any kind of sanction for voting against the government? You were suspended from the Parliamentary Labour Party last year because you voted to scrap the child benefit cap. What do you think will happen this time?
There's been no talk, and there won't be any suspension of Labour MPs from the whip. The vote that I got suspended for was very different. It was explained to me it was different in that it was a vote to amend a King's speech, which is seen as something on a different level. So that doesn't apply here. But in any event, MPs are asking themselves, what did I get into Labour politics to do? What did I come into Parliament to do? 136 disabled people's organisations have backed Rachel Maskell's amendment to vote this bill down. Liz Kendall was asked yesterday to name in the chamber to name one disabled person's organisation that supports this bill. She couldn't name one, and the reason she couldn't name one is because there aren't any. So 136 disabled-led organisations are asking Labour MPs to vote against this bill. But there's an easy way out of this. Not a single Labour MP has to rebel, by the way. All that has to happen, and I'm looking at my watch now, it's 10:30. There's still time. Parliament hasn't started yet. There's still time to pull this bill today. There's nothing magic about today. Tuesday, today, is an artificially imposed political deadline to save face. Drop the bill, listen to the backbenchers, listen to disabled people, go back to the drawing board, have the Timms review before this bill's brought. There's no reason not to do that, other than this becoming about saving political face. And it's got to be about getting it right, not about saving political face. It's too important for that. OK, Richard Bergen, thank you very much indeed. Let's pick up on some of those points. A lot of points that he's made there, Rosie. One of them, the main one really, saying this is about cutting money. This is not about reform. This is about cutting money. Personal independence payments are, you can claim them if you're in work. This is not about getting people back to work.
No, what I'll start by saying is I do respect Richard and his views and others who have voiced their concerns that mean that the concessions have been put in place and that the bill is in a better place today. But Richard spoke about people coming to our surgeries on Friday, Saturday, Sunday. I had someone at my surgery who wasn't working, was claiming PIP due to mental health problems, partly tied into the fact that he was in a housing situation that wasn't ideal, and wanted to work but felt like he wasn't able to. And this was a young person, and I want to sit there in front of him and say, this is a government that is going to support you into work because we know that will benefit your mental health. We know that will give you dignity and opportunities. And the vote today offers that. And that is why I urge colleagues to support the government in today's vote and vote.
Are you happy that help will come into place soon enough?
Yeah.
Before those the PIP payments are taken away from people?
Yeah, and there was concerns around that which colleagues raised, and it's meant that 300 million has been front-ended and brought forward for that support, which is right. It is right that that support is implemented early on so we can see people move into work. But I am confident that there is Labour values at the heart of this welfare reform, and it is the right thing to do.
What about Richard's point there? He said that Labour MPs will feel this like an albatross hanging around their neck for the rest of this Parliament if they vote for it.
I mean, I can't speak for my colleagues and how they feel, but I feel as though I am voting for a welfare system that needs reforming, that is unsustainable how it is, and to not vote today would be to maintain a system that we currently have, which is leaving our most vulnerable in a situation where they're being reassessed over and over again and isn't supporting people into work. I want to vote to lower those numbers so we aren't seeing 1 in 8 young people either earning or learning today. Yeah.
Joe, can you explain the Conservative position here? Because lots of people listening to you will say that you and other Conservatives say that the bill has to be cut, and yet tonight you will go through the lobbies and vote against a reduction in the welfare bill.
So the welfare bill has to be brought down, but it has to be brought down by genuine reform that protects people who need the payments they're receiving and removes people who are either receiving benefit they don't need, or in some cases,
so you think there are people
claiming
receiving PIP who don't need it?
Across the whole welfare,
incapacity benefit as well.
Across the whole spectrum of welfare, yes, I do believe there are people receiving welfare payments that don't need them. This bill doesn't deal with that. But there's a part of the conversation here we're completely missing, which is trying to move people into work where they can work, is the incentivisation around work. Now, the problem is this government has presided over unemployment rising by 12% in the last year and has put £25 billion worth of taxes on employers, a jobs tax. Now, that has made it less attractive for employers to employ people. So we need incentivisation through the tax system, reduce the tax burden that the government has put on small businesses and employers. That is a good way of getting people into work.
But going back to the welfare bill, £12 billion of cuts is what your party says it would do. And you're saying that the government's trying to do today is going to cause too much pain. So surely £12 billion worth is going to cause a lot of hardship for people.
It's pain to the wrong people. It's not just a case of 5 billion, 12 billion or any other billion.
But £12 billion is a substantial chunk of money.
People. So what Kemi Badenoch is doing is going through a policy review right now on welfare, so that when the time comes for the next election, we will have a fully costed proposal for genuine welfare reform.
But lots of people are going to watch this, and it's just not feasible to say that cutting £2 billion worth is going to cause a lot of pain, but £12 billion worth isn't.
Because who is taking it from?
So who would you take it from?
Who would you take it from? Disabled people. Genuine wholesale welfare reform is difficult. I get that. It's difficult for this government. It was difficult for the Cameron government led by Ian Duncan-Smith as the Secretary of State at the time. What we will do is have a fully costed plan at the next election. This Labour Party had 14 years in opposition, and they simply have no plan for welfare reform other than a cash grab because the Chancellor's run out of money.
You had a manifesto pledge that said you were going to cut welfare by 12 billion, and you're now saying there's a policy review under that Kemi Badenoch's having. So where did that 12 billion come from, and what was your plan at the time of the manifesto?
I'm not going to be given any lessons by the Labour Party about preparing for government. You failed to prepare for government, not your fault, but number 10 and number 11 have failed to prepare for government, and this is the result: stripping money, taking money from disabled people.
Fatima.
I mean, frankly, this is a joke, and it's depressing to watch. And people at home will also be deeply depressed to see a party who's just left government after 14 years in power, and a new one that has had time to prepare. And there doesn't seem to be new answers. And this is a question of order of priorities. This government has talked about inheriting a massive burden, about us being in a difficult economic situation. Economics isn't just numbers; it's people, it's our societies, our communities have been stripped back down to the bare bones. And if Labour really were a government of change, one of the things they should have done is what Richard was talking about. Think about how we ensure we have a society where we have a tax system that's just, where those with the broadest shoulders are kind of, carrying their fair share of their weight, that we have a tax system that means that we can generate the type of capacity for the government to support those who need it, and also invest in public services and the types of support that do get people into work. But you're starting with reforms that hurt those who are already hurting.
We started with making decisions that meant that we could invest in our NHS. We started by taxing wealth, by closing the non-dom tax loop, by
not
putting
going
a tax
far enough
on private schools so that we can invest those in our public services. They were Labour decisions.
This government has relegated itself to middle managers. You're just moving bits of money around. What we need is a visionary government that's able to meet the challenges that we're facing and do the hard stuff. Go after corporation tax. Go equal capital gains tax with income. Put a 2% tax on assets above 10 million. That's where we should start. That would generate billions of pounds of money. That
Seb,
wouldn't
do you want
have to make these cuts.
Let's talk about that, those proposals.
Yeah, I mean, well, first of all, I would agree with what you said, Fatima, about this not being ambitious enough, but I disagree with with everything you said after that. The fact is, the Working Age Benefits Bill is going to hit £90 billion by the end of this decade. That is an astronomical number, and I don't think any political party is really being honest about that. And what we're talking about today, at about £5 billion, I mean, that is barely scratching the size of what is going to happen. There are now about 3,000 people every day who are being signed off onto sickness benefits. There are 5 million economically inactive people in this country, which has grown since the COVID pandemic. That is not only costing the state and the taxpayer huge sums of money, it's the wasted talent and opportunity that is just languishing there, that's not being tackled. Now, fixing this is really hard. Yet, there are many different reasons why people are claiming certain benefits, why people are on in-work benefits, and why they are not in the workplace. You can't fix it instantly, and I think this whole row about PIP payments is to try and avoid the much more difficult and bigger conversation. And you've got the Timms reviewers that you talked about. I think that is important. It's good, but again, that's still going to be some way down the track. That's not going to happen for some time. And the fact is, the longer this goes on, the more people are allowed to get into the workplace. And to your point, Fatima, about how you can, try and make the sums add up on all this, business has already been squeezed so much by this government. The lemon pips, they've not only run dry, they've run off down the road. They're completely disappeared because so much has been put on employers through national insurance increases, through astronomical energy bills as well, through the changes to non-dom status, which was both by the Labour and the Conservative governments that did that. And the result is that our tax base is going to shrink and shrink and shrink. And if we do those things, it will shrink even more, which will mean even less money for these circumstances. So I actually think this thing, it's fine. It's a little change. I think probably the Conservatives probably should have backed it, to be honest. I can get your point, Joe, about saying...
So do you think that ministers think that some people getting PIP shouldn't be getting it? They haven't quite said it, have they?
No, but if you listen to what Liz Kendall said yesterday, they're talking in the generalities about people not getting these to the welfare system. I think it's fair to say that ministers probably do feel that not everyone getting PIP is getting it for reasons they should have. But I think they say that about the whole welfare system, which is undoubtedly true.
And what about paying for it? Because there is going to be a point in the budget where this has to be paid for. So Fatima says a wealth tax.
Yes. Well, I mean, I'm afraid to say I always think with a wealth tax, it's the get out of jail free card. When we've not got anything else we can do, we're going to get this, and it's those millionaires who are famously...
Any other ideas?
Well, the other idea would be, as I said, to tackle that £90 billion in welfare spending, or to tackle the inefficiency within the NHS, or to get our energy costs down. Those are all things we could do as well. But when it comes to the budget, the fact is that Rachel Reeves left us one of the smallest fiscal headrooms. That's how much gap she's got between her tax revenues and how much she's spent. That's almost gone, partly because interest rates have remained pretty sticky, as has inflation, as has the fact that tax revenues have decreased, partly because of those changes we talked about. It's very likely there's going to have to be a black hole that's going to have to be filled in the next budget.
What would you say to that?
I mean, what I would say to that is you're making... I don't believe that's an economic, because I think we have obviously ideological differences. Let's just put that... I think that's probably true. But these are actually not... being able to sort of up the 2% tax on 10 assets over 10 million would generate 24 billion a year, right? There are other countries who are doing wealth taxes, being able to give fiscal space to their governments to be able to support people. And our government has locked themselves into a very tight space where they're not generating the type of tax income. We have a very unequal tax system that puts more pressure on working people rather than those who generate their income through wealth. And that is both a moral imperative for us to fix it, but it's also an economic imperative for us to fix that unequal tax burden.
Just a quick question. How many millionaires have left this country since the election?
OK, so I was here last time we discussed it. It's not just for the tax bill reasons that people are leaving. They're also leaving because we live in a country that is not functioning, that doesn't have public services, that doesn't have a thriving culture space. But the social contract we have in this country is that we all pour in so that we can take out of it. If people want to leave this country because they don't want to contribute, then let them leave.
But they are contributing. They do pay tax.
They're not contributing their fair share. Why should I, as a working person, pay a higher tax burden than those who generate it through wealth? That is unfair. That is not the social contract of this country.
Answer that point.
The social contract that this country is
built
built on.
Answer that point.
I think we obviously have a tax system that I don't think is very competitive. I disagree with you that they've left because of the social contract. They've left because many people who are very wealthy are very mobile with their assets, and if you don't have an encouraging environment for them to invest, the fact is the non-dom status that was changed, there were the estimates there were going to be 70 people would leave. The answer is there's been thousands who have left, and those people bring with them business investment, they bring jobs, and yes, they do pay a lot of tax, and they will go and take that to another country somewhere else. And the
we should do what other G7 OECD countries do and put an exit tax on them.
OK. Taxes, do you think they're going to have to go up?
So the best way of growing tax revenue is to grow the economy, and then your tax take goes up. But Labour have ground the economy to a halt by taxing business and making it more expensive to employ people. If we had economic growth and Labour weren't killing it off, you would increase the tax revenue without doing anything to tax rates. In fact, you could reduce tax rates.
The track record of your last government is not great on this. The tax take went up massively.
So we had a global pandemic to deal with. That is fact. We had invasion in Europe, which is a fact. But I acknowledge the last Conservative government didn't do enough, and we paid the price. We lost the election. This government promised change, and so far it's been changed for the worst, and the voters are sorely aware of that.
Rosie, the Chancellor, is she going to have to put up taxes? How would you like to fill that black hole she might have?
I'm not going to preempt what's going to happen in the budget because I'm not in the Treasury. I'm not there for those conversations that are happening. What I will say,
but we can see clearly there is money that's going to have to be found because of the U-turns.
Yeah, what I will say back to the point of a wealth tax is we have seen other countries, other European countries, try a wealth tax and have to reverse it because it hasn't brought to their economy what they thought
so what's
it was
the
going
answer?
to.
What's
I
the
actually
answer?
agree
What's
with Joe that the way out of this is growing the economy. Where I disagree with Joe is around how we do that, because this government has put things in place like the planning and infrastructure bill, which has removed blockers from businesses so that they feel as though they can grow and therefore grow the economy. We did put increased national insurance so that we can put the burden on the broader shoulders, but still protecting those small businesses.
You're making it more expensive to employ people, which is terrible for economic growth. That's what the national insurance contribution rises have done, and that's why the economy's, flatlining.
But can I ask you a question? Because if we look towards the budget, I know obviously you don't want to preempt it. There's three things you can obviously do. One is you can cut public spending, and I think the events of the last week suggest that's probably not going to happen. You can raise taxes, or you can change the fiscal rules. If you were in that situation, which of those three would you take to fill the hole? Because there is going to be a hole that is undeniable, and those are the only three options on the table. It has to be one of them.
Yeah. I'm not in the Treasury. I don't have all those details in front of me. I don't have a civil servants to present that research to me. Therefore, I'm not going to preempt.
It's going to be a dilemma for the Chancellor.
Going to be in the budget.
But you don't want to say what you would like to see.
I want to see the economy grow, and I believe this.
So you're banking on growth.
Is making decisions that allows this economy to grow. We've seen international investment in the UK more so than under the Conservatives, but I do acknowledge as well that we're in a very difficult situation internationally, and things like tariffs have made the economic environment more challenging.
I'm just going to move on. I'm sure this is all going to come up again tomorrow at Prime Minister's Questions. We will be on at 11:15 tomorrow to cover all of that, the build-up and the live coverage, and Keir Starmer taking PMQs for the first time in a couple of weeks because he's been away. So I'm sure those difficulties over welfare might just come up. Now, you might have noticed that a heat wave has hit a lot of Europe and a lot of the United Kingdom. It's continuing into its fourth day in some parts of the country, not all. In Heathrow, London's Heathrow yesterday, it was 33.1%. Another sweltering day for some today. So really, these heat waves across Europe, they are becoming more frequent, and our weather colleagues tell us that they are becoming more frequent. Do you think this will shift public opinion on climate change and particularly net zero targets, Fatima?
I mean, it does. I mean, polling shows that every summer when we have heat waves, public salience on climate change goes up. But we also know we have consistent support for climate action. And we have these conversations about unprecedented temperatures. There's nothing unprecedented about this. Scientists have been telling us that extreme weather events will become much more frequent and more extreme because of climate change. And so this sort of brings us back to the conversation neatly that we were having before about how we grow the economy, how we give resilience to communities, but also how we take on the challenges that are hitting us hard and fast. And actually, Labour's green agenda is the route towards that. Us driving towards net zero is the way that we make sure that we protect people, that we sort of insulate homes. The people who are hardest hit by heat waves, but also cold in the winter, are poor families who are unable to insulate their homes, which means they freeze in the winter and they are unbearably hot in the summer. And so the Warm Homes Plan, GB Energy, investing in green jobs to insulate homes up and down the country is the winning ticket for this government. That also creates jobs, that also draws in investment. And so that's where I would appeal to you, Rosie, and your government, that there is a positive vision. There's a way that we kind of build this country in a way that kind of builds inspiration and hope, but also takes on the fundamental global challenges that we have. And it's squarely in the net zero plan. And we need a government who's willing to defend it from the far right, who's willing to defend it from the Conservatives, who have turned their back on net zero despite legislating for it.
Let's put that to Joe, because your leader, Kemi Badenoch, has said it's impossible for the UK to meet its net zero target by 2050. Do you think that that's the right thing to be saying when it does seem that there is some public support for trying to do this?
I think it's just a statement of fact. Look, the last government increased renewable capacity fivefold, and we cut emissions faster than any other G7 country. So the last Conservative government has got a good record on tackling climate change. But it can't be done in a way that makes people poorer. And I think that's what Kemi is saying, is that you can have whatever target you like, and sure, it might be possible to hit it, but not if it makes people poorer. And she's just been honest about that.
If you take a look at this is a poll from YouGov from March, which asked to what extent people supported or opposed the government's commitment to cutting carbon emissions. And you can see there strong support, somewhat support, quite big numbers there of people saying that they are in favour of this, rather than, dropping some kind of commitment to this.
I mean, I'm in favour of reducing carbon emissions, but not if it makes people poorer. Not if people are forced to change the way they behave.
Is there a way of doing it without doing that?
Yeah, well, I mean, increasing the capacity for renewables in this country fivefold in the last 14 years. That's one way of doing it, and we've made progress and reduced carbon emissions more than any other G7 country in the last 14 years. Now, I support the current government continuing to reduce carbon emissions, but it can't be at the cost of UK residents, particularly the poorest. Usually what happens is the poorest pay the highest price when trying to bring in penalties for carbon emissions.
Rosie, not if it makes people poorer?
It doesn't make people poorer. What we have seen is that a move to renewables and net zero means that we're not bound by international fuel prices that are set on the international markets. Therefore, it means that bills will lower, businesses will have more certainty about what their bill is going to be at the end of the month, and therefore maybe feel like they can grow their business because they're not holding money back in case of an energy bill that's come through that's through the roof. But also, I will say, there is a cost to not doing this, and I don't know how Joe can defend the government's track record on this, because already in 8 months we have approved more solar than they did in 14 years.
But just choosing one renewable and then quoting a stat isn't an argument. Look, Ed Miliband promised that energy prices would come down by £300. They've gone up.
Well,
so the Labour government's already failing on it.
We're still bound by the international fossil fuels market. We have, in her first 100 days...
So bills will only come down if we get rid of fossil fuels.
You're comparing your 14
nonsense.
years in government to their 9 months or 1 year in government, right? And
just
so,
a promise. The promise they made that bills would come down by £300 in this year, and they haven't. They've gone up.
And right now we're still feeling the repercussions of you not taking this, your government not taking this seriously.
You spent £8 billion on GB Energy that won't produce any energy. I mean, no one's convinced by this stuff.
What do you mean it won't produce any energy?
GB Energy is not an energy-producing organisation,
no,
but you're giving it £8 billion.
It's investing in renewables. It's investing in
So how come
net
energy
zero.
prices have gone up?
Because we're still on. I said we're still on the international fossil fuels market because your government didn't act quick enough with this. My generation feel the urgency.
It costs more to produce electricity at the moment. Electricity prices for carbon released into the atmosphere is more than gas. So I just think this is a complete...
The Climate Change Committee report said that's a temporary sort of up in bills, partly because of the international gas market.
You can't afford temporary ups in bills to chase something that may not happen.
You know what my answer is, which is the government should support people with their bills, the people who need it most. And again, part of...
And the warm homes discount does that.
Yes, and we should double down on home efficiency.
I think the thing that's big part of this, and I think the UK broadly does have a good story to tell, that, you know, our climate emissions have halved since the late 1990s, and we've really been on the vanguard of this for a long time, which I think is great. But the big missing piece, of course, is the baseload energy capacity that's not reliant on fossil fuels. That the UK has the highest industrial energy price of any developed country, and that's one of the reasons businesses are struggling so much at the moment. And the answer has to be building more nuclear. Now, this is something that the government has started to get moving on, that we've seen Sizewell C finally getting signed off, and Hinkley Point, which was the last government, has been signed off as well. But again, it's all so slow. You know, I'm old enough to remember when Nick Clegg was Deputy Prime Minister, and he said, look, we're not going to build new nuclear power stations. If we do, they're not going to be ready till 2021, which is pretty much the ideal time when we had the war in Ukraine, energy prices soared, and we could have done with that. So we've got to keep pushing on renewables. There's no doubt about that at all, and they've got great plans for offshore energy. But we've got to also think about what we can do building more nuclear power stations across the country to give us that baseload capacity to get our energy prices down, so you're getting to net zero without having to punish people for it.
I mean, the challenge that we have with this government is that it doesn't have a clear vision on what it wants to deliver over the next 5 years. And so it happens that every 6 months, it's a will they or won't they remove the investment into net zero?
We've got 10 seconds for you to come back on that.
We need a long-term plan, because this is a long-term
Let Rosie just answer that point.
I don't agree. I think Ed Miliband has a very clear vision, and that
is
yes, he has been supported by the Treasury, as we've seen with Sizewell C and other nuclear and infrastructure projects that mean that we can move towards net zero at that pace, which we know that there's speed is of the essence here, but this is a government taking that seriously.
That's all for today, but I'll be back tomorrow with more Politics Live, including Prime Minister's Questions at 11:15 here on BBC Two and on the iPlayer. Please join me then.